foster care system. And today, a fight mounting on how to fix it. In Ohio, community leaders are meeting to press for more years of life training. Nationally, legislation to support young Americans in the foster care system is making its way through Congress. Here's why this matters. When these young people age out of foster care, they are falling through the cracks. Nearly 60% of young men in one University of Chicago study had been convicted of a crime after leaving the system. More than 75% of young women became pregnant, and almost 25% were homeless. Joining me now is Republican Congressman David Reichert of Washington and Democratic Congresswoman Karen Bass of California. They are behind legislation trying to hit back at this problem. Congresswoman Bass, there are 397,000 young people in foster care. Is the system setting them up to fail?
Well, the system can set them up to fail, but that's exactly why we've introduced legislation to begin to repair things in the system that we know full well are broken. And I think that this is an example of a bipartisan issue, and I'm very excited that we passed legislation out of the House unanimously last week to help improve the system.
Congressman Reichert, you're the sponsor of this bill, H.R. 4058, and it aims in part to address this. How would it help specifically?
Well, it does a number of things. First of all, we want to create an opportunity for kids to have loving homes. I mean, that's number one. So what we want to do is incentivize states and state systems to increase the adoption rates and also focus on adopting older children. And then also there are incentives for the first time on the federal law for guardianship to help place kids into guardianship. Look, what happens is these kids move from foster home to foster home to foster home. They have nowhere to call home. They have nowhere to go to Thanksgiving, Christmas, Easter, you name the holiday. They need a loving home to have success, to have a hope for a successful life.
And Congresswoman, you're a co-sponsor of this bill. What do you say to people who think these foster kids receive too many services already for too long, that maybe it's even building dependency?
My goodness. Well, first of all, if you think of children in the foster care system and you want to know what they need the same thing as any other child. When we, the government, remove a child from home, then they are our responsibility, and we need to do everything we can to make sure they're successful. And as your earlier report demonstrated, if we don't take care of them while they're under our care, then you know what happens to them afterwards. So we either take care of them now, or we will take care of them for the rest of their life. And I don't think that benefits anybody.
Congressman, more than 20 states at this point have used federal funding to expand foster care up to the age of 21. That seems to be pending in other states. Is that the best use of resources to keep these young people on their feet and even out of prison?
Well, yes. You know, look, we're talking about in the past, you aged out at 18 years old. These 18-year-olds then end up on the street with, again, no place to call home. So I think extending it to 21 is absolutely right. You know, my past history is in law enforcement. I was the lead investigator on the Green River serial murder case. When you drove down the street, and you drive down the street today, if you see 10 young people on the street today involved in human trafficking, 6 out of 10 of those are foster kids. And as Ms. Bass said, we have to take care of those kids. They're our responsibility. We need to get them off the street and into good homes.
And you know that there's been an awful lot of coverage about sex trafficking, but we have viewed it as an international problem. But now, just as the congressman said, we are finding out within our own country, in our own neighborhoods, girls in particular are being involved in sex trafficking. So legislation that we both worked on is looking to address that as well. So the child welfare system needs to recognize that domestic sex trafficking has involved in a disproportionate manner kids in the foster care system.
And Congresswoman, I'm glad that you raised that. We just saw this news that 168 children were rescued in a nationwide FBI sex trafficking sting. And there is some evidence that many of those may be foster kids. Why are they so much more vulnerable?
Well, because they don't have the support, and so what happens to, especially after they age out, if they have nowhere to go, they have to survive. So if people don't have a loving home, then they become victims to sex traffickers. There's also a lot of evidence of girls who are as young as 12 years old being caught up in sex trafficking. And this is something that a lot of gangs in certain states have begun to add to drug trafficking of girls. So this is something that has to stop.
I think it's important for your listeners to remember that these kids are coming from broken homes already. Exactly. So they're leaving broken homes, going to the street. And they end up in foster care, and it's a struggle for them because they're carrying a baggage full of problems. And sometimes those problems aren't being addressed in the foster care world. They run away, they end up on the street, and even if they stay at a foster home for a while, foster parents sometimes and the foster care system will not allow them to participate in after-school activities.
I have to say, having talked to a lot of individuals in the foster care system, the stakes of this are so clear emotionally and also for our nation. This is a huge swath of our next generation. We are letting them fall through the cracks. You're doing an important job here trying to focus on this when so few are. And I have to say, it also warms my heart to see a Republican and a Democratic representative joining forces on this. So bravo for that. Yeah, let's take a photo out there. Thank you so much, Representative.